Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Uncanny X-Men number 272, cover dated January 1991. The cover is by Jim Lee and inked by Scott Williams, featuring de-aged Storm once again back in her adult body. And that's a little bit of a spoiler for what happens inside the issue itself. And then we have three of the most macho X-guys around: Cable, Archangel, and Wolverine from the three teams, New Mutants, X-Factor, and X-Men. And this cover, it is not too bad. It's not one of my favorites of Jim Lee's, but part of the reason for that is I can think of what would have been a better cover. I think a cover featuring Wolverine versus Archangel would have been really cool and an interesting challenge for Jim Lee to make that look cool on a cover without, the ability to go to a double page spread or something like that, because that is the cool fight in the interior of this issue. Also interesting to see here as we're coming to the end of X-Tinction Agenda, just who it is that we're presented with as being the members of the X-Men up here in the top corner box, because everything is going to change very, very soon. So let's open this one up to the first page. We do not get a Dramatis Personae layout on this first page. Instead, we get a TV report from Manoli Wetherill, and she did report on, as Bob Harris correctly mentions, the apparent death of the X-Men in Dallas, covered in issue 227, and she makes reference to the fact that it now appears the X-Men were not dead. They were apparently or believed slain months ago in Dallas, and that gives us another indication as well of the sliding timescale of Marvel continuity too. But the really interesting bit is the different people interviewed for the Vox Pop section of her news report. So we've got a little in-joke here with Suzanne Gaffney, who's the assistant editor on the title, getting interviewed and wondering about the word Janasha. That's some kind of new Japanese restaurant. Reed Richards gets interviewed, and he makes reference to his history with the X-Men and members of X-Factor, and how he finds it impossible to credit the charges made against them. And I really like this bit of characterization from Claremont in terms of what he gives Reed Richards to say next, because that could be it. We could move on to the next character, but instead Claremont has Richards say, especially in light of the reprehensible means, and referred to the kidnapping of children leading to the death of one used to apprehend them. That is absolutely in line with the way that Reed Richards would see things. I really like this bit here too in terms of who this mysterious figure is. He refuses to tell the news reporter his name. If those mutants are guilty of crimes, they deserve the appropriate punishment. And look, the word is bolded. Now take that lens out of my face before I make you eat it. It is Frank Castle. It's the Punisher. And so, of course, Jim Lee was the artist on Punisher War Journal. And here he is getting one other opportunity to draw Frank Castle. And as far as I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is maybe the only time that Chris Claremont ever wrote the Punisher, this one panel here. Then we have Emmanuel da Costa, who happens to be Roberto da Costa's father. Lucas Hamilton, a history teacher, and he's just a normal civilian. And Jennifer Walters, aka She-Hulk, and she says, I've applied for and hope to be granted a visa to go to Janasha for the purpose of representing the X-Men at any and all criminal proceedings. Given a fair trial, I have no doubt of their speedy and certain exoneration. And Manoli continues with an immediate, how shall I put it, negatory on what She-Hulk was hoping for. Attorney Walters' request has been denied by the Janashan Ministry of Justice on the technicality that, since she was never admitted to the Janashan bar, she's neither qualified nor competent to practice law in that country. So instead of a Dramatis Personae, as we've had in the previous two chapters of X-Tinction Agenda in Uncanny X-Men, we are going to get a double page spread featuring all of the captured mutants from the various teams, New Mutants, X-Factor and X-Men. But just before I move on to that really cool double page spread, let's have our creative team here called out: Chris Claremont, writer; Jim Lee, penciler; Scott Williams, inker. I have a feeling on some pages that Scott Williams is not the sole inker on the page, that there was a bit of a deadline crunch and there are some ink assists going on. Joe Rosas and Glynis Oliver, colorists. And again, when you've got two colorists working on the book, they're the last creatives to touch the pages before they go off to the printers. That's an indication of a deadline crunch. Tom Orzechowski, the sole credit for the letters. So let's look at that 2-page spread. Here we go. So we have our title of the story, 2 Capital Crimes, and all of the various X-Men, New Mutants and X-Factor members that are on trial in Genosha. And you get a little note there, and in absentia, Forge, because Forge has put himself into a voluntary state of unconsciousness so that the Genoshan telepaths can't pry his mind for a secret weapon that he and Cyclops have planned to use. And so here we go. We have, it's interesting here to see also the different height sizes between the characters. In particular, Jim Lee drawing Wolverine in the correct proportions of a man who's supposed to be only 5'3" when he stands up. So that's nicely done. A lot of detail here in the background, maybe a little bit too much detail, but the colorist helps make the characters stand out here on the podium they're standing on, with the steps there at the back for the characters who are standing way at the back, including Archangel and Cannonball. So Cyclops protests that they're American citizens and the Genoshans have no right to put them on trial in this manner. Can you prove that, says a prosecutor. We have made inquiries of both American and international databases and can find no evidence of any of your identities. So Cable asks Banshee, how's that? And Banshee explains, a while back, as a precaution, we introduced a pernicious and ineradicable computer virus into the federal data net. That was way back in Uncanny X-Men number 158. You'll find a review of that issue in the back catalogue on the channel. It automatically erases any reference to the X-Men and associated groups. And Cable says, let me guess, and when I hooked up with the mutants, I got added to the program. Brilliant. How you managed to survive as long as this, I'll never know. And then Beast chimes in, and this is funny too. He says, if you're so hot, friend Cable, how come you're here in the prisoner's dock with us? So the brass tacks is that they're going to be subject to Genoshan laws, and in comes the judge. And he says, after I'm seated, gentlemen, we'll proceed with a reading of the specific charges. Are the accused properly represented? And they're represented by court-appointed counsel, he's told. And Cyclops says, who looks like he'd rather be defending mass murderers. And at just this point, Wolverine, fed up with the whole charade of a trial, decides to attack despite being manacled, having his hands manacled behind his back and being unable to pop his adamantium claws. So whatever these manacles are made of, or whatever the contraption is that is around his hands, he is unable to use his claws, unable to slice out of those manacles. And you can see here, if you're looking at this video in high definition, how the ink on this particular page has rubbed off on this one. And that was one of the downsides of the newsprint printing of 1980s and very early 90s comics, that you could have a situation like this occur, kind of obscuring the art a little bit. But it's okay. Everything's still legible on that page. And here we get this cool page of Wolverine attacking the magistrates. Now that's a difficult drawing to do when you have one character in the middle of a bunch of others, a trio of others here, in order to keep everything clear and also reading well in terms of perspective and foreshortening. Jim Lee does a very good job there. But this is also a page where I'm wondering if Scott Williams is the sole inker on this page. Some of the hatch marks here in the shading on Wolverine's thigh don't really look like what one is used to from Scott Williams. So it could be there's another inker's hand on this page. So the judge instructs the mutate Storm to use her powers in order to blow Wolverine back, and then Chief Magistrate Anderson gets involved physically, and she says, "Those bones of yours, Wolverine, may hit like solid steel bars, but the rest of you is flesh and blood. You can't hurt what you can't hit. On the other hand, there are plenty of places where you're vulnerable. You don't need power, bub, when you have skill." So she kicks him right in the jaw. So Wolverine, of course, because of Wipeout's powers used on him and the other mutants, does not have his mutant healing factor operative. And a beating like this, on top of the other beatings he's received, going all the way back to the torture in the Outback from Donald Pierce and the Reavers, means that Chief Magistrate Anderson is capable of knocking him down to the ground and almost unconscious as well. So, Magistrate Anderson basically sums up to the X-Men and the other mutants: "I'm empowered by the state president to offer you mutants a choice. You can either go to trial, and while it will be a free and fair one, have no illusions about the outcome. As our laws are written, your very existence condemns you. So on the one hand is certain death." And Jean steps in and fills in the rest. "We can guess the alternative, Chief Magistrate, to submit ourselves to the gene mod process and end up like Storm and Wolfsbane as your mutate slaves." And Jean says, "I think I speak for us all. We reject your offer." So the judge orders that the mutants be remanded into the custody of Cameron Hodge, the psychopathic anti-mutant sadist. And you can see that laugh on his face there as he sings "What a Day for an Auto-da-Fe," lines from the opera Candide. So Cameron Hodge, a cultured villain, but a sadist. And here he is, going to have some fun with his mutant captives. So many toys, he says, so devilishly hard to decide how best to play with them. And here's Forge, like I said earlier. He is in a self-induced trance, as Hodge puts it, which has saved him from the magistrate's mind probes. And but Hodge here has although deprived of the pleasure of the pleasure of torturing him, Hodge says that he has deprived Forge of his bionic limbs. So he's taken off his hand and he's taken off his right leg. Those limbs Forge lost in Vietnam. "Only prudent, only fair," says Hodge. "Not that he'll ever have need of them again." So now he is going to have some fun, as I said. But his fun is interrupted by Cable and Gambit. "Sorry, Hodge," says Cable. "I'm not in the performing mood." And he thinks to himself, Gambit's good. He picked up his cue to back me up like we planned this. And Gambit, a charmer, kisses this particular lady magistrate and says, "Your pardon, Cher. Poor man's got 10 bits already. Can't have you adding more," as he grabbed her gun and directed it away from shooting Cable in the back. "Pity there's no time to do this proper," as he snogs her. By the way, I want to note here that this particular page is coloured by Joe Rosas, and you can tell what pages he's colouring in some places because of this technique of his. He likes to kind of run the colour in the background like that. We've got these green streaks in the background. I'll point it out again when he does it again on another page. That's something that Glynis Oliver doesn't do, and it's a way to distinguish between the pair. So back to this little episode. It's a pretty cool little incident. Gambit here throws the lady magistrate into the others, and Cable tells him, "Grab a gun, Gambit. Without our powers, we'll have to use our weapons." But Hodge is moving quickly with his tentacles, So he wraps up Cable, but Cable pulls off those tentacles with his bionic arm, points the gun at Hodge, but Hodge has moved very swiftly to grab Psylocke. So shoot, he says. He challenges Cable. I'll make it easy for you. I won't move, not an inch. Scout's honor. Course, pretty little Psylocke can't make that promise, but that's a nasty big gun, Cable. Bet it'll send a bullet right through her face and into mine. Am I worth it, he asks. Is she? Yeah, that's a really nice long vertical panel there. Really gives the sense of the situation that Hodge has concocted and the Hobson's choice that Cable faces. So what is Cable going to do? Well, he thinks about it and he drops the gun. And again, this is a page where I have a feeling that this page is not inked by Scott Williams. The line making does not 100% look like him, particularly here, the way the hair is rendered on Cable's arm. Some of that kind of scratchier inking for the details, the folds and other details of Gambit's trench coat. Yeah, my feeling is it's someone other than Scott Williams working on this page. I'll leave it at that for the moment. So Hodge, disgusted that Cable's dropped the gun. Drat and bother, he exclaims. I so wanted to see the look on your face, Cable, when she died and I didn't, because Hodge made a deal with Nastir, a demon, that he wouldn't be able to die. So even if the bullet hit him square in the forehead, he wouldn't die. And Hodge shoots at Gambit and Cable with these spikes. So he's hit Cable in his bionic arm and Gambit in the thigh, and that's going to prove to be a mistake a little later in the issue. So again, those tentacles, Hodge grabbing everyone with them, throwing Psylocke to the ground and pulling Cable up close to him, saying, one might almost be duped into thinking you pathetic creatures were actually human, but I know better. Your bionics make you dangerous, Cable, just like Forge. Best be rid of them. So we don't see what's going on here, but the way the tentacle is moving towards his eye, it looks like the idea is to pluck it out. And Psylocke exclaims, his arm, good lord, his eye. And remember, Psylocke lost her own eyes. She was maimed by Slaymaster. It would be in Marvel continuity. Maybe not too long ago, maybe only a year ago in Marvel continuity. And so it seems like a heartfelt reaction from her. Let's see what happens next. She gives a look to Cyclops. That's important. Please, she says, though. No more. Please. Not for me, I beg you. I can't bear this. Please have mercy. Forgive me, Cyclops. I accept the Chief Magistrate's offer and freely submit myself to the gene mod process. So, pretty good top-down angle here. It almost looks like maybe the eye was taken out. And yeah, we'll have to watch out for that in subsequent chapters of the crossover, whether the eye was taken out or not. But just at that point, we see that Alex Summers, Havok, is there, and he says to Hodge, when Hodge suggests that some further interrogation is in order to make sure it's not all a trick, that won't be necessary, Commander. She's in the Gene Engineer's hands now. And he says more quietly, and out of yours, thank heaven. That's a pretty interesting panel there as well. Borderless, except for this background, and it looks like a bit of a screen tone on the background. Hodge thinks that Havok is making a mistake, a big mistake, but Havok retorts, my authority, my responsibility, and he commands the magistrates under him to take her away for processing. And she looks beaten with her hunched shoulders, and Havok walks away. He says, there's no order in the world that can force me to watch what Hodge is going to do with the remaining prisoners. So Hodge here grabs Archangel. He's got Archangel and Wolverine in his tentacles. And he says, first things first. Alas, poor Angel, I knew you so well. We were such pals. Look what Apocalypse has done. Branded you more cruelly and completely than I ever imagined possible, because it was Archangel that cut his head off. And here there's a nice little callback to much earlier continuity on the title. Last time we were all in this kind of mess was when Magneto had the X-Men prisoner in Antarctica, says Beast. He was a bad guy then. I was an Avenger. No such team as X-Factor, just the X-Men. And that's a callback to issues 112 to 113. Cannonball asks, how'd you all bust loose? Storm picked the locks, says Beast. No chance of that now, with her transformed into a mutate. And also there's time for a little conversation about Psylocke as well. Banshee's wondering if it really is her. And Beast says Wolvie vouches for her. And Banshee replies, he ain't exactly in top form. Boyo, just look at him. But Jean intervenes and says it won't matter who she was or is if they go through with the transmodation. We have to do something. So what can be done? Hodge is back to his sadistic games. So he's going to give everyone front row seats to turn the page. A to the death battle between Archangel and Wolverine. And here's Hodge with his personal observations. Have you noticed these two really and truly don't like each other? Hate at first sight, Warren told me once, from the moment the little low-life roughneck creep made his entrance by putting some major moves on Ms. Jean Grey. Something else that these stalwarts have in common: unrequited love. How sweet, how sad. Perhaps this will settle things once and for all. But what's really fascinating is how much more intense this enmity's become since Warren's debut as Archangel. I'm curious to see what happens when they're locked in a box together. So here we go. So this again is Claremont calling back to something established very early in his run, and also explored a little bit in his backup stories to classic X-Men. This enmity between Warren Worthington III and Wolverine, and there's a little class dimension to it as well, which comes out in what Hodge reveals that Warren told him. So Warren's wings attack Wolverine. Wolverine, I can't control my wings, he says. They're attacking of their own volition. And again, this is all subsequent to Wipeout using his powers on them. So Warren has no control over his wings without his powers. So Wolverine here deflecting with his claws those synapse disrupting feathers, and he thinks to himself, what to do? The best thing to do is to take the fight to him, up close and personal, where my claws can make a difference. Wings are the primary threat. Losing his powers has weakened the boy's control over them. Something about each of us makes the other nuts, thinks Wolverine. So much so, Angel isn't even trying to escape. He's out for blood. And the more the wings get, the more they'll want. Anyone who gets tossed in here, they'll be fair game. Simple choice. Either I take Worthington's wings or his life. So they're really going at it here. And you can see it in Jim Lee's art. But Claremont's dialoguing of the scene is interesting, and it shows Wolverine thinking, whereas we don't get into Archangel's thoughts at all. Some choices, we're told in the third person narration, while easily made, are not so easily carried out. And we have a real sense of the bloodiness of the battle there, even though it's in silhouette. These purple streaks here, an indication that this is a page coloured by Joe Rosas. And look who's enjoying the fight between Archangel and Wolverine, except for Cameron Hodge. Now, this is what I call a fight, he says. Now we're going to get a scene switch to a less reputable section of Hammer Bay, among the only 3 mutants still on the loose. So it's Jubilee Boom Boom and Richter. Now, Boom Boom and Richter don't have access to their powers. They were never subjected to the trans modification process, but they were put into these mutate costumes, and Jubilee's using her power to blast them off their bodies. And just at this moment, by happenstance, they see the chief engineer, Dr. David Moreau, with a mutate, using the mutate's power to dig a tunnel. And Moreau gets on the phone to Magistrate Anderson and says, I'm in position. If all goes well, we should reach Hodge's bunker within the half hour. So he directs her to initiate phase 2 of whatever it is their plan is. And Jubilee and the others decide that they're going to trail Moreau and the mutate. So that obviously is going to pay off in subsequent parts of the crossover. But then we're back to the pit, to the arena, and that ongoing brutal fight between Wolverine and Archangel. But it's not so absorbing that Hodge doesn't have time to scheme and put into place a plan against, we'll find out whom. So he pretends to be Moreau and he calls up Wipeout. Could you come to my office, please? He says to him. I have some matters of importance to discuss with you. So Wipeout says at once that he'll be there directly. And then elsewhere in the Citadel, Psylocke has been taken to be subjected to the transmodification process. But she was faking her subservience and attacks the magistrates, the 3 magistrates that are bringing her to the lab. She says, in many ways, I'm nothing like the woman I was, and far more like the one I always yearned to be. And for more on that, see X-Men Annual number 11, Uncanny X-Men Annual number 11, and my review of that here on the channel. So, and she moves really well here in terms of her ninja training. She uses the Magistrate's Blast to take apart the manacles that are holding her and knocks him out with it as well. And now she's free and goes up into the air ducts of the Citadel. Here I go, she says, alone, armed, facing impossible odds, crawling through a ventilation duct. As Jubilee would no doubt say, eat your heart out, Bruce Willis. So a reference to 1989's Die Hard movie, but also I think the sequel came out around this time. Could it have been as early as... No, Die Hard 1 was 1988. Yeah, so Die Hard 2 was 1990. So a reference to... maybe it was in Claremont's mind because of the sequel. So here we have Hodge in real scenery chewing ham villain mode. Anybody in residence, he says, as he kind of cranes his neck around the corner of this open door. No, then there's no one to mind me making myself at home. Where do you think the G-Engineers got to, Wolfsbane, he says. And she responds, I have no knowledge, master. Let's find out, shall we? Off goes the shell of his desktop CPU. On go my interface cables. And out comes the data direct to my brain. So we can see that here in the panel. And then we get this tight close-up on his maniacal grin and face. I declare the man's a marvel, he says. If anyone alive can restore me to my physical humanity. But then something else in the G-Engineer's files gets his attention. What have we here? Naughty, naughty G-Engineer, a plot against me. I'm impressed, Moreau. I didn't credit you with either the smarts or the courage. Pity I can't let you get away with it. So there's all kinds of intrigue going on in X-Tinction Agenda in terms of the president, the chief G-Engineer, the chief magistrate, and Hodge all scheming against each other. So Hodge here says, this is once my own schemes have been brought to full fruition, he is going to stop the chief G-Engineer from getting away with his plot against Hodge. So Wipeout arrives and Hodge points his gun at him. So what's going to happen next? Well, we won't find out directly. It'll become plain a little later. It's time, Gambit, as we go back to the pit, the arena. And Gambit asks, "What, Cyclops, what?" "Psylocke should have made her move by now," says Cyclops, "which means it's your turn. You deliberately took that spike." Hodge fired, figuring rightly, since he's the kind who will never pass on an opportunity to do any of us harm, he'd leave it be. So Gambit's impressed. "Storm told me you were good," he says. And Cyclops responds, "She said the same of you. A thief par excellence. So now I'm to prove it, eh?" says Gambit. And prove it he does. And this is a great little sequence. Excellent storytelling here from Jim Lee as Gambit pulls that spike from his thigh with his teeth, drops it down, catches it with his feet, and then pulls his feet up in order to gimmick the lock on the manacles, and voila, May Brave. Beat that, Stormy, he's free. So it's one of those little cool callbacks to a very cool moment in issue 113 when it was Storm that did that, as Beast mentions earlier, and now it's Gambit to do it. And it's as cool a little scene as the original. But also this is one of those pages where I'm not 100% convinced that all of the inking on this page is by Scott Williams. In particular, the inking there on Cyclops' face does not look 100% like Scott Williams's work. So again, I'm wondering if there's another inker involved on the work on this particular issue. It's the same on this page too. Some of these panels, this particular panel here, this one here in particular, also this one, again, it doesn't look 100% like Scott Williams inks. Back to the story though, everybody's freed now, and Cyclops says it's time to take care of Archangel and Wolverine. "Cable, you help Forge. Beast, cover our rear. Everyone else follow me." So Cyclops taking charge of the combined mutants from their various different teams. That's his natural role as leader. And at that moment, his brother has gotten a message from someone he thought was the chief engineer, and he arrives in the engineer's office, and there he discovers the dead body of Wipeout, shot dead by an ultra energy plasma bolt. So of course Havok's own powers is that of a plasma bolt, so he's been framed by Hodge. And Wolfsbane arrives and calls out murder. She says, "Hurry, Masters, the killer is still here. Havok murdered Master Wipeout. I saw it." So Havok protests that she's lying, but of course mutates are not supposed to be able to lie. That'll be determined by a proper investigation. So he's under arrest. And then elsewhere in the Citadel's a big place, we have Magistrate Anderson with Mutate Storm. And she is bringing her somewhere. It would have been to the arena, but who finds them except, of course, Cameron Hodge, who always seems to be in the wrong place at the wrong time for people who are plotting against him. So this is a pretty cool anchor image of Chief Magistrate Anderson firing away at Hodge, and he accuses her of treason and reminds her that it's a capital offence. "A crime I'll gladly commit to save my country," she replies to him, "from the nightmare you've planned." So just at this moment, when Chief Magistrate Anderson looks like she's going to be killed by Hodge, we have a nice top-down angle here, bird's eye view of Psylocke booting out the grating from that air duct system. And Hodge asks rhetorically, Anderson, "My dear woman, I merely seek to fulfill Jinosh's true destiny as the means whereby the scourge of mutancy will be eradicated from the world. I ask you, is that so awful?" And Psylocke's response is, "Ask a Nazi, better yet, ask their victims," as she starts blasting away at him with her machine gun. That's a really cool scene there. Just a pity about the colouring error there on her thigh. So it is an in the nick of time rescue for Mutate Storm, who is handed up by Anderson. And then she asks for a hand. And Psylocke says, sorry, mine are full. Anderson says, I can't make it out without you. You're bad luck. And you haven't a prayer of survival without me, says Anderson. I have the key to the restoration of your powers. Psylocke is skeptical about believing her. If you don't, says Anderson, it's over for the X-Men, for Genosha. Is that what you want? So in this extreme situation, Psylocke is going to have to trust Anderson, the enemy of her enemy, yes? And then we're back at the arena, and that fight has to be stopped between Wolverine and Archangel. So Jean jumps down into the middle between them, and Wolverine is protesting that he'll kill her too. And again, interesting the characterization here. Warren says nothing. He's been overcome by a bloodlust. And but Jean tells him to back off, fold his wings, and he does. Reach to the man within your soul, she tells him, who fought free of Apocalypse's chains. You've the strength, Archangel, to be one with the promise of your name. A beacon of light capable of shining through the darkest shadow. I know it's hard, she says, just as I know you can do it. And as for you, bub, so Wolverine's in bits. She tells him to hold fast. I'll see you safely home. Cyclops is just looking down because he probably intuits, that there has been some tender moment between Jean and Wolverine when they shared a cell in a previous chapter, the previous chapter of the X-Tinction Agenda Crossover. But just at that moment, there is the arrival of Anderson and Storm at the door. And the question readers would have at this point is whether Chief Magistrate Anderson betrayed Psylocke. Because where is Psylocke? So Beast says, Storm and the Chief Magistrate, Cyclops, she means you, when Anderson commands Mutate Storm to take him. So Cyclops is taken unawares there, and Storm uses a hurricane gust against him and draws him towards her and makes physical contact. What's she doing? He thinks to himself, my eyes, they're burning, he screams. But that isn't all that's happening. In fact, far from it. Because somehow or other, Storm's body grows into that of an adult, and the mutate process is reversed, and also she gains access to her memories. I'm once more myself in mind, in spirit, in body, she says. And what about Cyclops? Well, just at this point, Psylocke arrives. She is holding a rear guard against Hodge and Hodge's arrival. She's running out of ammunition, and she says to the X-Men, I like this kind of the British phraseology, clear the way, trouble's right behind, did my best, chums. And Hodge fills in, but some folks, let's face it, simply won't be stopped no matter what. How totally considerate of you all to try this mass escape. Such a shame the attempt will fail, at the cost, of course, of your lives. So step right up, heroes. Who's to be the first to fall? And we can see that this encounter between Storm and Cyclops has returned Cyclops' powers. Actually, Hodge, that privilege has just been reserved exclusively for you. So he blasts Hodge with one of his optic blasts, and Magistrate Anderson is impressed. Cyclops tells her, stand behind me, Chief. If I uncover my eyes even a fraction. So conveniently enough, she's brought his ruby quartz visor, but then it appears that it was her plan all along. That it must have been the chief engineer who told her what he had done with Storm in the trans modification process, the bespoke program that he used, and this was their plan against Hodge, to return the powers of the X-Men and the other mutants and use them against Hodge. Nasty, nasty, says Hodge. You've got your optic blast back, Cyclops. What a surprise. Nice shot too. Best I've ever taken. Unfortunately for you, though, nowhere near quite good enough. Now, muties, and for the last time, it's my turn. So we're moving into the conclusion of X-Tinction Agenda. The tide has turned. the means of the X-Men escaping and getting their powers back has happened by virtue of the G-Engineers' scheme against Hodge. And everything's to be concluded in New Mutants number 97 and the final chapter, X-Factor 62. And then we'll get an epilogue in Uncanny X-Men 273. So there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 272. Let me know your thoughts on this issue in the comments section to the video. If you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It really does help the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.